Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm your host, Jay Acharya, the CEO of Aspire Consulting and Training Limited, and this is the Becoming the Leader in You podcast. In every episode, I'm talking to guests about their leadership stories, both personal and professional, stories of their inspirations, successes, challenges, and how they may have overcome them. Before we go any further, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And although this is being shown on YouTube, you can also listen to us on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and other podcast stations. My guest today started his career in clerical work measurement and computer systems design, which sounds precise, structured, and let's be honest, not the obvious path to winning hearts and minds. But somewhere along the way, he realized something many organizations are still trying to figure out. Technology enables, but it's people who actually make things happen. Across a career spanning more than 50 years, he's brought together process design, behavioral engineering, and technology to unlocking human potential and drive real performance. He's worked with organizations large and small across 14 countries, collecting job titles along the way, including data analyst, HR consultant, and even CEO of a US software house. So yes, he knows a few things. And these days, he's got his own leadership and management development company, helping organizations improve performance without burning everyone out in the process, focusing on reduced stress productivity. So please, let's say hi to Clinton Wingrove of Clinton HR. Clinton, hi there. How are you doing?
Hi there, Jay. Doing really well. Thank you. What about yourself?
Fantastic. Thank you for asking. I'm really, really well. Thank you so much for taking time out today. And I do know that you do have a busy schedule. So it's always great to have guests taking time out to come on this small little podcast and talking about you. And that's what this is all about. So in a nutshell, what is it that Clinton HR does and who are you?
We work with organizations large and small, and I often refer to it as handling those tipping points. Organizations, as they grow, they get to a point where they've promoted top talent into management positions, but frequently those people then struggle because they've not been trained to manage people or manage groups the size that they've got. And of course, they're at the point where they then can't spare the time to catch up.
Yeah.
So I work with organizations on practical solutions for that because, you know, we often have HR departments, L&D departments, talent departments, but they're being pushed more and more by legislation and current thinking to corporate governance and compliance.
Yeah.
And yet there's very practical things that people can do to bring out the best in their teams.
Absolutely. And you know, it's the age-old response all the time: get this done, get this done, get this done, without having the support or the training offered or given or not done properly.
Absolutely. And very often we're finding significant numbers of people end up in people management positions, which actually they discover they don't like.
Yeah. They'd rather be doing their own work, not managing others.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, we seem to have forgotten the old adage of having dual ladders where you could be promoted for doing exceptional work in your technical field.
Yeah.
It seems as though being promoted to a people manager is what people expect these days.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's one of the challenges, you know, for so many different types of organizations, both here and outside of the UK, where there's an element of promotion is normally given to the people that shout the loudest.
Yep.
And they're normally, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of the time they're the incompetent ones who are promoted.
Yeah, can be, or you promote the really talented people and then you lose a talented operator and you gain a poor manager.
Yeah, that's true. And you know, without giving away your age, but you know, you've said that you've had 50 years worth of experience. You must have seen lots of changes decade on decade on decade.
Yes, and one of them is what we just talked about. I mean, in the 70s and early 80s, lots of organizations had policies and procedures where you could be promoted, get the financial return and the responsibility without having to manage people. That's one of the changes we've seen. Okay. We're also in a fascinating time now where I saw a post today on LinkedIn where people are asking, you know, will companies be able to insist that people come back into the workplace? And it's quite interesting because what we're seeing is the quality of relationships is dropping largely because of virtual working and globalization. And yet it's the quality of relationships that really define excellent leadership and bring out high levels of productivity. So some of the technology changes and social pressures are actually working against us. Right now, we're seeing massive change.
And it's that hybrid working that you're talking about, which is, it doesn't really bring teams together as in the olden days. And it does sort of make them more dispersed. And it's difficult to keep those teams sort of working radically well together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I did some work with Dr. Paul Marciano. We wrote a book for McGraw-Hill called Super Teams. And we looked at the issue of relationships and how important respect is. And it's incredibly difficult to build the strength of relationship if it's virtual. We know that parts of the brain are not activated when you're looking at each other like we are on screen. If we had exactly the same conversation face to face, we'd be picking up far more subtle signals, strengthening our relationship, which ultimately is going to affect the way in which we work together, the way in which we, one of us leads the other, or we both collaborate.
Absolutely. And let's move on to my first question for you for today, Clinton. Obviously, the podcast is called Becoming the Leader in You. And my first question is, what does that mean to you personally?
Yeah, it's interesting because I reflect right back to my early days. And, at school, I was apparently diagnosed as an introvert. And consequently, I was put into every situation imaginable where I would need to develop and apply extrovert behavior. So I was made a solo clarinetist in the orchestra. I was made a drill sergeant in the cadets. I was made the leader of the debating team. So that had a strong impact on me, and I've learned a lot of extrovert behavior, which I think as a leader, you need to have that ability. I also had parents who brought me up to respect others, irrespective of their differences, and always to try and help them when possible. So those two experiences led me to develop a strong opinion about the importance of building small, strong relationships rather than having, a wide network of casual ones.
Okay. You mentioned you built up your extrovert behaviors. What kind of behaviors would they look like today?
Basically, for example, this, you contacted me and said, would I be interested to come on your podcast? And I said, yes. My natural instinct would be to say no. It comes down as well that, I do keynotes at conferences, do presentations for clients. But interestingly, when I walk in the room, my instinct is to find somebody I know and latch onto them. So I've learned the behavior not to do that, but my instinct is, one of my mottos is don't be miserable, too many people are better at it. So I'll use one of the metaphors I often say, and that is that my perfect holiday would be sitting at the top of a hill throwing stones at people coming up.
So that was you when I was on holiday that time.
So I've had to learn, the extrovert skills, which in leadership you need, but not just to be, I don't think it's about being charismatic and just talking a lot. I think it's about learning how to build relationships with people. And in this virtual, uncertain and globally spread world, I think they're absolutely essential in any leader.
Absolutely. And I think you're so right when we talk about this virtual world, because more and more people are attaching themselves to this virtual reality. And, there's so many software companies that are creating that virtual reality world for people to work in. And you've got office spaces in a virtual reality. And it's scary that you think this is where we're heading to, which is similar to that book and movie, the Ready Player One, where people just live in a virtual reality day in, day out. But I'm for one to have face-to-faces. And currently, with the current climate and the conflict going on in the Middle East, it's not allowing that to happen. And I'm an extrovert, and I have to be out there and enjoying my time with people and talking to people and doing things face-to-face. So things like this, I also do find a bit of a challenge and a struggle, but you overcome it. But, so let me move on to my next question for you, Clinton, and it's about the people that have inspired you. I say to people when I meet them, when people ask me the question, Jay, who inspired you to do what you're doing today? And I can say, on one hand, I've got 3 people that I could name immediately. But who've been your inspirations, or what have been your inspirations to get you to who you are today and the way that you operate and work with your clients and the people that you have in your network?
I've been really fortunate. Despite the length of my career, I can honestly say I've only ever had 2 managers who I thought were bad. But to start out, one of the people who's inspired me has to be my father.
Okay.
I took an entry exam for a grammar school when I was 11 and passed. And it was interesting because on a Friday evening, the headmaster of the school visited our house and told my father not to send me, A, because I'd fail, and secondly, he didn't think they could afford the likely cost of me going there. And my father and I, it was a long conversation, but he summarized it by saying, son, you have a choice. You can live your life being governed by other people, or you can choose how you live it yourself. But today is the day you make that choice. And that has colored my thinking ever since. And perhaps it's made me a little bit of a rebel, but it was inspirational. And compared to many of my peers, I can look back and see the value. So that's one.
Yeah.
So he taught me the importance of discipline, self-confidence, commitment, but also respecting other people. Then the second one, and I'll name him, was a guy called Avi Engel. He was former CEO of Pelat United Kingdom, an HR consultancy and software house at the time. And he was an exceptional leader. And in particular, he taught me the real importance of living your personal values.
Okay.
Not making them up, but actually being true to yourself.
Yeah.
But also combining that with making decisions when there's ambiguity. He said people around you will always look to you to make a decision. And if decisions were easy, they'd make them themselves.
That's true.
So that's come with me. People need leaders when things are uncertain. They don't need them when they're going well.
You mentioned values, and it's about the values that make the person as well. And so many organizations have values as part of who they are. It's the soul of the organization or the company. But it's also questionable how many of those values are ever lived. And
one of the things I often say to clients is the more posters you've got on the wall professing your values, obviously the greater the need for them to be lived.
I work with so many organizations where I say, okay, tell me what your values are. And they go, oh, we don't know. It's part of who you are. And if you're serving customers and clients, etc., then this is what you should be living by. And if you don't know what they are, what's the point in having them? And what's the point in spending X amount of money in getting a marketing agency to create them with you or for you? So that does have an impact. And how do those values that have been instilled inside of you show up when you're working with your clients?
In a number of things. I won't, for example, I won't take on work that I don't believe is ethically or morally sound.
Okay, well, tell me what that means. What do you mean by ethically or morally?
I'll give an example. So, for example, one of the things I teach is negotiation skills at executive level. But I will not teach the sort of negotiation skills that are used to force decisions. So there are some very inappropriate practices and skills and methodologies that are used. So I think that's a good example. I believe that we need as leaders to demonstrate care, and I use that as an acronym. We've got to give people clarity. We've got to give them assurance. That doesn't mean to say we can guarantee their job, but we've got to assure them that if we're their leader, we've got their back. We're going to look after them.
Of course.
We need to give people recognition. There's too much training done about giving critical feedback and not enough training about recognizing what people do well. And fourthly, we need to demonstrate empathy. Frequently when we're in a leadership position, we're fortunate. Now, did we earn that job? Probably, but there's also an element of luck. And we need to show empathy that other people have personal pressures as well. And I'm not talking about being soft on people, but just understanding that they've all got families, they've all got livelihoods and so on.
Exactly. You mentioned recognition and reward. And, I think whenever people talk about recognition and reward, the assumption from a leader's perspective is, reward means I have to give them an increase in salary or I have to give them a bonus. But sometimes reward doesn't cost a thing just by saying thank you.
Yeah.
And however, how many companies do you have where managers and leaders or team leaders, at the end of the day, they just walk out without even saying that little thank you to the work that's been done?
Yeah, and I had a client in New York, a business that was in free fall. A new CEO came in, took over, and in a relatively short space of time, really transformed the company in terms of how it operated.
Yeah.
But employee engagement was going down, top talent were leaving, employee morale was poor. And when we cut a long story short, what we discovered was he was so intense on sorting out the technical issues that he'd come in the morning, walk straight past reception, straight past security, straight past his PA into his office. And he'd come out in the end, in the mid-morning and speak to people. And I said, what do you think your behavior is demonstrating? And he said, I'm focused on the business. And I said, yes, but you're also demonstrating that your email comes before civility.
Yeah. And that's behavior breeding behavior as well, because other people will follow that same way. And my third question goes back to a bit on what we were talking about before, about the values that people have within, that are instilled within them. So it's about belief in leadership. What belief do you hold in your leadership style that other people may disagree with?
We've probably already covered one of them, and that is that money is not a powerful driver of loyalty and performance. It's mutual respect that does that. The second one is I believe that too many leaders depend too heavily on goal setting. The number of organizations I've worked with that put in smart objective setting and so on. And do we need goals? Do we need measures? Absolutely. I'm not saying we shouldn't have those, but it's a bit like performance appraisals. Do they actually drive up performance? And the answer is no. It's actually the interactions after those goals have been set, or the interactions prior to the goals being set, that actually drive up performance. And I see so much of this about big, hairy, audacious goal setting, smart goals, KPIs. And I say all of those are important, but they're a corporate governance. They're a way of monitoring and tracking progress, but they don't win the hearts and minds.
No, those are just names and figures and things like that to the employees.
Absolutely. Now, what drives the performance up is the conversations that you have, and there's a relatively small number. I mean, typically when I'm working with clients, I identify 7 conversations that managers should be having with people, which actually we know psychologically will impact the way in which they behave.
Of course,
and that they're incredibly easy to acquire. But as I say, there is a school of thought that says no, it's smart objectives that drive business up. Sorry, I disagree.
No, and I would be with you on that. It's not about smart objectives. It's got to be realistic objectives, things that people can achieve. And when we do talk about smart objectives, it's something that you talk about at the start of your performance year, and then it's not discussed or talked about again until the end of the year. And when one of my beliefs is that one-to-ones are the most important thing you can have in any organization. However, those one-to-ones do need to happen every month. And it frustrates me when I speak to managers and say, so how many one-to-ones do you have? And as an example, one might say, I've got 10. And I'll ask, okay, so how do you manage them? How do you manage those objectives? So that's one of your KPIs. How do you manage that on a monthly basis? And they'll say, well, I'll take 2 days out. So that gives me 5 each day. And it's kind of, wow. So, and what happens if you have some other work come through that's more important, more urgent. Well, then the one-to-ones have to go to one side. It's kind of like, so how many days are there in a working month?
Yeah.
And how are you not able to identify an hour one week for one person, an hour another day for another person, and spend those 10 over 4 weeks?
That's right. But yeah, what I find is, there are very practical ways of doing things. I mean, I can remember a situation where I had 9 reports, direct reports into me, one of my early management roles that I had. There were 2 people who needed to be talked to probably on a daily basis.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. One was lack of experience, so it was in a developmental role, and the other one was experiencing some personal challenges and not handling them well. The needs were quite different. I had 2 people that I needed to speak to much less frequently. They were highly experienced, happy in the work and so on. And then the topics that you talk about, it's about adjusting that. And a leader understands what the big picture in the future is, but also how do they need to help individuals focus on what their challenge is. For some of them, it might be helping them work out what they've got to do tomorrow. For one person, it might be what are they going to do next week. And a real leader is able to juggle those requirements.
And it's the time that you're investing or spending with different people. So if you're spending too much time on one person who constantly isn't fulfilling the tasks that they're meant to be fulfilling, then that's a cost to you as a manager, as a leader. But if they're starting to improve and you can see the development happening, then you realize that's the investment you're putting into them. So, and that does come back to those one-to-ones in the belief system, because I speak to so many managers who just say, I don't have the time for one-to-ones. They're a waste of time. And that sort of makes me realize they're not invested in their people. They're just invested in the outcomes that are expected.
I'll be brutally honest. I'd say they're in the wrong job.
Well, and as a consultant, one would use the right words to make them realize that as well. But sometimes I think there's a phrase which is, you can't flog a dead horse. And sometimes you have to sort of step back and say, okay, I can't win on this one.
That's right.
But let me move on to another question, and it's around pressure. So you do a lot of work in reduced stress productivity. But when pressure is the highest, who do you become as a person? Who do you become as a leader to deal with those pressures or those stresses that are either brought on by yourself or brought on by other clients for you?
That's an interesting one. A guy called Dr. Khan wrote a book on stress at CEO level. And when I was a CEO in the US, interviewed me and said, how do you handle stress? And I said, I really don't know, because I don't get it. I've been very fortunate, and again, it's probably partly upbringing and partly education. But yeah, the one thing I do notice is that if I'm in a situation where I've got a team who are pressured or stressed, then clearly the feeling that you've got to do something increases, and I do have a natural tendency, and it's what Dr. Marciano and I call partnering.
Okay.
And that is, I don't go to people and say, do you need help? That in a sense immediately puts them on the defensive, and it suggests that they are the problem. But what I do metaphorically is hold hands, step in, roll up my sleeves, identify what needs to be done, equip them to spot that and start working on it. What can we do now? Because that's the only thing you can change. The only thing you can change is what you're doing. So what's the most sensible thing for us to do in the next 10 minutes, the next hour, the next day? So step in, metaphorically hold their hand, take off the status hat, don't go in shouting and instructing, but help them to identify what's the logical thing that we as a group can do.
Excellent. If I was to ask you the question, what's the biggest change you've seen over the 50 years that you've been working in a leadership capacity, and what are the changes that have made you go, oh God, not again?
there's two changes I've seen that bother me, and that is we keep looking for this magic bullet. This, is it 3,000 business books are published a week, if I remember rightly?
Yeah.
If that's true, WH Smith's Borders and that would be the biggest companies in the world.
They're all self-published, though, aren't they now?
Yeah. So it's looking for the magic bullet when, as I say, there are very practical things that we know work. They are just biological. It's why, as a human race, we've survived.
Yeah.
So that's the change that bothers me, and I think we're seeing that accelerate at the moment. I think the other thing we're seeing, and I'm not challenging the legislation, it's been brought in for good reason, but more and more legislation is pushing us to try and proceduralize everything. And, great leaders very rarely are procedurally focused. Now, do I support the legislation? Do I support corporate governance and compliance? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we need to encourage people to act like human beings. We need them to be real. We need them to be authentic.
Yeah. And the reason I ask that is because I've been doing this for 37 odd years now. And I have to say, the one thing that really frustrates me is that people have lost the art of common sense.
Yeah.
And they're so bothered with reading books, looking at models, looking at theories, looking at techniques, yet they don't put them into practice because it's too much hard work. Yeah. And
this notion. This notion that you can go out on YouTube, or any of the other platforms, many other platforms are available. The fact that you can go out, watch a video for an hour, and all of a sudden everything's fine.
You're an MD.
Try and learn how to ride a bike
doctor
by doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can become a medical doctor in 3 days.
That's it. Yeah.
But that's
we've got to put in the effort. We've got to show the commitment. We've got to be prepared, as you say, to do things. And reflect on them.
So do you think that many leaders are trying to find the easy way out to manage teams and to achieve their objectives, as opposed to doing things the hard way?
The really good leaders, no, but the majority probably yes. We put them in that position. As I say, we promote people into people management positions without discovering whether they really want them. I worked with a client in the US, which one of the best clients I've ever had, who actually invested heavily in giving people the opportunity to learn what people management is before they were asked, do they want a people management position?
Sure. So that's important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think we put people in positions where then they feel obligated to become what they're told they should be, rather than being authentic, being themselves.
Sure. So another question regarding differences from a few years ago to today. What would you say the biggest differences generationally from leaders in the 70s, 80s to leaders today?
Well, in the 70s and 80s, it was perfectly acceptable to be very, very directional. You instructed people and you threatened them. I mean, I can remember one of my early jobs. You were told if you made one mistake, you'd be reported to the skip level manager, and if you made two, you wouldn't have a manager. I think that's a positive move in that we've gone from pure strict management to a good combination of management and leadership. I think that's a big change.
Okay.
The challenge now, though, is we're now expecting leaders to very much personalize virtually every interaction they have with their staff. And I think late Gen Zs and early Gen Alphas, that's going to be the real challenge. Their expectation is that the employment that they go into will adapt to them. And I'm seeing that more and more. And again, to some extent, legislation is also reinforcing that.
Let me just ask you a final question for today. It's Clinton. It's about an honest conversation. What would you say is a conversation that you've been avoiding to have with yourself that might be impacting how you're doing things today?
Yeah, that's a really easy one. The conversation I need to have with myself is, when am I going to retire? I've been incredibly lucky. I mean, I've had so many different roles, and the majority of them are roles that I've created. You know that old age saying that says, if you want to be a manager, act like one. Many of the jobs I've had didn't exist. I just persuaded the company I was working with to create them. So I've been lucky. You know, I seriously wake up every day looking forward to what I do.
Wow.
But of course, as the years go by, you know, that does start to have a toll.
Of course.
I've been happily married for 52 years, and she's my biggest supporter, and I'd quite like that to continue.
So with my wife, she's always happy when I'm not at home. It's kind of, when I'm at home, she's kind of complaining, saying, "Oh my God, you're here, you're doing it," and it's her frustration, me being at home. She prefers me working away from home.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I chose a wonderful wife. I've chosen great employers, and as I say, I've learnt that, you know, you can always change things. So to some extent, I mean, again, I passionately believe in the value of HR. I'm a chartered member of the CIPD. I'm a freeman of the livery company, the company of professional HR people. But I'm also a bit of an anarchist. You know, if you don't like something, fix it.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about is what Clinton HR does. So tell me a bit more about Clinton HR in a paragraph or so.
Yeah, work with organisations, helping them to unleash the potential of their people and transform their performance. And typically by working with them on those tipping points, when they've got a group of managers who've probably been made managers too quickly, and now don't believe they have the time to change and develop. You know, I need some training, but I can't do it this year. So that's where my sweet spot is, working with them and showing that there's very simple things that you don't need to go on a MBA course. It'll be useful, but you haven't got time. You don't need to change who you are. There's very simple, practical things that you can do that make a difference. So that's really where I work. Sometimes that's working with them in groups. Sometimes it's coaching them individually.
That's fantastic. Okay. Can I just say thank you so much for your time today, Clinton. You've let us know a bit more about who you are and what Clinton HR does. But for anyone else that would like to contact you or learn more about how you can help them and their organizations, how would they get in touch with you?
I'm the only Clinton Wingrove on LinkedIn. So thank you, Mum and Dad, for that. That was good foresight. My email address is easy. It's clinton@clintonhr.com. Yeah, so innovation didn't creep into that process.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll make sure that everyone can actually see your information, and whoever's listening on the podcast, I'll make sure that I put it onto the description for them as well. But as for today's Becoming the Leader in You podcast, thank you for watching and listening. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the episodes. And from me is keep growing, keep leading, but most importantly, become the leader in you. I've been Jay Acharya, and my guest has been Clinton Wingrove, sorry. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jay. Real pleasure to talk to you today.
And you too.